Okay.
Great. Hey, Andre, we're recording this so that you can go back over it later. Okay, so I started just by kind of generally looking at the region that we're at in Appalachia. So Appalachia has a really unique type of mountains that's like a rolling hillside with a lot of valleys in between. And I suspect that we're at one of these spots that's, it's kind of like on the edge, just where it starts to become a valley between two ridges. So that'll be important in just a minute. And then I also looked at a bunch of the images that were done on the site visit and started to identify a couple of different like I would call them zones within the larger ecosystem. So the large ecosystem, I'm fairly certain is zone 7-1A submontane. It's a Southern Appalachian hardwood mix. And so you can see that right over here on the left-hand side. In this image, there's a bunch of pine trees, there's some maples. I see one oak tree and there's a couple of little oak saplings down in the duff. Then also located not necessarily like directly on the site, but I suspect it's kind of around the periphery where there are fewer pictures, is an ericaceous understory. So that has a bunch of rhododendrons, it has mountain laurels, and it has wild azaleas. And then so this actual area that all the grasses are in is not a technical bald, but I think it kind of mimics the general plant composition of what a heath bald is. Grasses are really hard to identify, but I suspect that there's some broom sedge. I think that there's some tall fescue, and I would be shocked if there wasn't crabgrass. So these are all really important because you can actually see in the structure of each of these images, the overall plant composition is located in really different spots on the site. And then just quickly returning back to here, you can see that the slopes in this area are quite steep. When the slope is too steep, all of the soil falls away. And then everywhere else, it's pretty it's pretty dense with forests. And that is really, really important because, so the two soil types that are on this site are, one is called ash soil and one is called chandler soil. So they have slight differences, but overall they're really similar in that this soil type comes from like a rhododendron pine understory that has turned from duff, and now all of the big trees are removed, and they're incredibly susceptible to erosion, which is a pretty big deal on this site. All of these things that you're seeing here where my mouse is moving, I don't think that was from clearing. I think that that's actually from erosion. And the reason why I think that is because all of the pieces are fairly small. This looks like a tree that was felled, and you can see how there's a bunch of stuff collecting around it, which that would typically happen if soil is moving down the slope onto the trees. And the big reason why this is happening is because, as you see in this overall area, the mountain is very literally held in place by this dense overstory and canopy and a really dense understory with these rhododendrons. So when it's replaced by a bald, it's actually a really big deal, and the soil can't hold itself on the side of the hill anymore. So that is something that we should be thinking about, and I have some general strategies for how to deal with that later. So then going back to what the client is after, I see him as having three kind of essential goals. One is for human-centered, one is agriculture-centered, and one is ecological in nature. So he wants humans to have a good time when they're there in the natural swimming pool and with some outdoor recreation. 2, agriculture. He has a background in food. So it's like some kind of a food-producing landscape, and also we would need to support some pollinator habitat so that any kind of fruit-bearing trees or fruiting plants can actually grow. And then also it sounds like he is an animal rights activist, which I imagine translates to larger ecological notions. So that's going to be things like general ethical use of the site in a way that's beneficial to animals, plants, and organisms at large. So I think the best way to approach this is, of course, to see these three different actors and how they might actually start to interact with each other. So for example, like one thing that we should start to be thinking about generally is that inside of the human space, so in this natural pool, we can use it to create habitat for pollinators. So in that way, the pool not only serves the humans, but it also serves the ecosystem. For agriculture, we can use a protective food landscape strategy using orchards. And so that in the way that the agriculture supports the humans, it also supports the ecosystem, because by planting an orchard in a strategic spot, we can actually prevent a lot of the erosion that's currently happening at the site. Also, you can do, it's like pretty minimal in how much effort you have to put into an orchard. Like once it's in place, you really don't have to do a lot. So it's kind of best case scenario for like a more vacation home strategy. And then third, inside of the ecosystem, we want a low effort land management that's like a very light touch in the landscape. So it benefits humans because we don't have to do too much, and it's great for, it's like ecosystems really just don't like to be disturbed generally. So then kind of getting into, sorry, I'm just gonna turn off the music. So just generally kind of getting into how this would actually start to look as far as strategic interventions is that, like I was saying, the pool can be, you know, we should make each of these spaces serve not only their original actors, but also like the larger network. So the pool can be a place for humans to hang out. We can use it to create pollinator habitat. And because we're doing a natural pool system with no chemicals, it can also start to be a source for irrigation for the orchard. The rhododendrons is a really, like, it's a beauty workhorse. When rhododendrons flower in this area, it is so beautiful. It's really, really, really special. And rhododendrons, because of the structure of their root system, they're really, 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 really good at protecting from erosion. So by planting rhododendrons along with, you know, maybe a more classic orchard typology, you can protect erosion, attract more pollinators, and stabilize the mountainside. Then again, so those open fields are incredibly important for pollinators. So I want to say it's too much work to like plant this whole site with orchards, but doing it in strategic areas and then leaving open areas for, that's like where pollinators kind of flirt with each other and they mate a lot. It's not like they're feeding grounds, but it's really important for pollinators. So to make sure that the overall space serves all of the different behaviors of pollinators and insects at large, that is a really important and sustainable way to approach like agriculture. And then also the soils, I cannot stress this enough. These soils are absolutely terrible for farming. It is not on the table to have this be a farm. It's not on the table at all. So a couple of the reasons are because the erosion is such a problem. Soil for farming generally is tilled a lot. It is pretty neutral in its pH. And then also it really needs to be disturbed quite a lot. If you're on an erosion prone site and you keep disturbing it, the mountain is just going to fall away. This actually is something that I did about 1.5 years of research when I was in graduate school. I was hired by a professor, and in Appalachia specifically, there was a big movement right around the late 1800s, early 1900s. All of these farmers came in, they put a bunch of farms on the mountainsides. The farms fell into the rivers, and it created one of the largest natural disasters ever in the United States. So it is not farmland, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't grow food there. So like I was saying, the high acidity is a limiting factor for like tomatoes, but it's not a limiting factor for persimmons, which are like a heritage food in the area, and they're delicious and quite unique. So like a food guy, I think, would be pretty into that. And the orchards can also deal with low disturbance and also with like stabilizing the mountainside a bit. So then just more generally, like, or more specifically, I also was looking into natural pool systems, what works, what won't on our site. Typically, a natural pool system is fairly straightforward. You have an inflow, maybe it's rainwater, maybe it's tap water. You have a regeneration zone. There's an optional filter in this between the regeneration zone and the swimming area. Loosely, People recommend 50-50 regeneration to swimming area, and then there's an outflow. And then the actual water that's in the swimming pool, it goes through a pipe and pump system back to the regeneration zone and then back to the swimming area. And it's just like a recirculation cycle. In general, people say 1/2 to 1 times the total volume of the pool liquid should circulate through the system per day. But there are some constraints on our site that actually I think we need to tweak these more like standardized numbers. And then also, so one of the things that's also happening that's actually more of a design constraint is like a lot of natural pools are these lovely, wide, languid, like it almost looks more like a lake or a pond. We're on a slope. It doesn't really make sense. Not only would we be like fighting the actual cascade of the natural landscape, but also the erosion around the pool is a concern over a long period of time on a disturbed site. So one way to deal with this that I think is fairly straightforward, and it actually creates a more efficient recirculation and filtration cycle in the natural pool system, this is an image from the site visit. So it's this like beautiful waterfall cascade, fast moving. You can see all of the rhododendrons and the mountain laurels holding the riverbanks in place on the side. And then again, this is the same forest type. You can see pine trees here. These are maples. I don't actually see any pine trees here, but that's beside the point. But also I want to, like, if you look at this, there's no algae. The water has some dirt in it, but it's clear water. Like it seems really healthy. And so what I think we should do is, as opposed to taking a slope site and making a flat pool, we should really be kind of trying to embrace the natural curves of the landscape and almost make like an artificial cove, which I think is more beautiful and it's more site specific. And also it will be better long-term, and it's a better filtration system. Like it's significantly more efficient. So then just generally about how the chemicals in a pool actually works and how the natural pool replaces those like behaviors. So, can't see what I'm pointing. So traditional chemicals, they have 5 kind of essential goals. One is sanitation, getting rid of germs and viruses. One is pH balance, so making sure that the water stays at a pH between 7.2 and 7.8. One is a hardness stabilizer. Water has a lot of dissolved minerals inside of it, which if the water is hard and has a lot of minerals and it goes over the same spot over and over, it does this thing called scaling, which is when those minerals settle and they can like clog pipes, and it's really bad for pools. There is also a lot of chemicals that are used to reduce algae and also to clarify the water. So in water, there's always like lots of little dissolved, bits of minerals and like bits of leaves and stuff. And clarifiers are a chemical that coagulates those things. They sink to the bottom and a vacuum gets rid of them. And then also there's shock treatments, which is a high dose of chemicals that just gets rid of all organisms of beneficial or otherwise, and it just gets rid of all of them at once. So the natural pool replaces all of these things with, I would say, things that are form-based largely, and then a little bit of filtration. But so to get rid of viruses and bacteria, they use biofiltration. I also generally recommend using a proper filter just to be really safe. But those are super low maintenance, not a huge deal, and it won't do anything to the natural pool, and it's still chemical free. Like you can use a UV filter, and that's a good replacement. For the pH balance, the best way to do that without chemicals is to make sure that your plant palette that you choose for the regeneration zone is really nicely balanced. Plants uptake different minerals, different like dissolved compounds, and if you have too many water lilies, your water is going to become basic, which is terrible for your skin. The hardness stabilizer. So again, just reiterating, that was when it was like the water has a lot of dissolved like rocky mineral stuff, and then it settles and it it causes scale. So that's replaced by mechanical filtration, which pretty straightforward would be you pour a bunch of water on gravel, and at the bottom of the gravel has like a filter, almost like a coffee filter. And then it takes all of those teeny little rocks out of it, and that's mechanical filtration. Algicide. So the two biggest things that you have to do for preventing algal growth, which is the biggest issue with natural pools, in my opinion, is a lot of movement and a lot of oxygen in the water. I don't know how to replace shock treatments. Like if you get staph in your pool, I don't know what you would do as a natural pool. So I'll keep looking into that. I personally think that algae is going to be the biggest issue for most natural pools. And I have some pretty discrete design solutions for how we can start to strategize making sure that algae doesn't grow. So it's preventative instead of like algae grows and you remove it somehow. So algae is disgusting. Even in a natural pool, it's a really big deal. So this is a chemical pool that's been poorly treated. This one on the right is a natural pool, and you can just see they did a bad job. All over the sides, you can see, so these like little mushy plants that a lot of them are sort of settling to the bottom. That actually is late stage algae growth. So essentially they didn't do a good job. Algae has colonized this pool. And like, you know how when you go swim in a lake and you put your foot down on the bottom of the lake and it's like soupy.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Gross.
It's disgusting. If we don't prevent algal growth, that is what the bottom of this natural pool will feel like. And I have really discrete ways that we can deal with it. One way that some people deal with algae growth is that they just put, there is a type of dye that a lot of like water features will put into it that is a really deep, it's almost black, but it kind of has this like purple blue color to it. It's derived from beets. And it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just makes it so that when you're in it, you don't see how much algae is in it. But then,
you still feel,
dude, it's disgusting.
You still feel it if you touch the ground.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to swim in that natural pool. It probably looks lovely when she's not in it, right? But actually, I mean, again, it's like you can see, look at all of that scum on the side over there. Yeah. You can see all of the scum there. I can also tell just even in this area that has a glare, I can tell that there's a lot of scum because, so this is called a riparian buffer right there where plants are partially submerged. The gradient between the outside and the deep water should be much softer.
Yeah, it's very strong.
Yeah.
The line is very strong.
So what it means is that all of the algae has taken over the spot under the water and the plant roots are being suffocated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like I can just tell, yeah, we should not just dye the water. It looks lovely, but there are design solutions that can prevent this from ever happening and that you can end up with, I mean, look at this.
Yeah.
Like this is a really well-designed natural pool. And like the water is crystal clear. Yeah. Like they did a really good job. Even on the bottom, even where it's gotten some like, there's like a lovely little dusting of maybe some kind of algae in the bottom, but it's not an imbalanced ecosystem because that's what a natural pool is. It's an ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So what does algae love? Algae loves sun. It loves still water. It loves water that has a lot of nutrients in it. So like fertilizer, or, you know, if a tree is above it and all of the leaves fall into it and you just let those leaves kind of degrade, all of that is what creates like the gross bottom of the lake. That's like what it is. It's really icky. So algae loves that because there's lots of dissolved nutrients inside of leaves. They love low mechanical filtration because algae relies on those like little dissolved bits and bobs of leaves and sticks and stuff. And they also love an imbalanced plant palette because it means that algae is the type of plant that is like a monoculture. it really just won't grow in a healthy ecosystem that has lots of different stuff in it. It's only in places that are in really bad shape. So what do? We do the opposite. We have the pool area be shaded. Algae does not like to grow in the shade. We have to make sure that there's a really high amount of recirculation of the water so that it's being regularly filtered through both a mechanical filtration space, which, like I said, is going to get rid of all of those bits of dissolved leaves, and then also the biofiltration space. That is what is going to get rid of all of like the fertilizer and stuff. Because like a water lily wants fertilizer and it'll just take it straight out of the water. We also need to make sure that there is a high degree of mechanical filtration to prevent the dissolved nutrients from ever being there in the first place. And then we also want a really strong separation between the mechanical filtration space and the biofiltration space. Just to repeat, the mechanical filtration is like rocks and stuff, and then the biofiltration is the plants. A lot of natural pools will combine those two things, and I think it's a really unsuccessful model, because what happens is that all of that silty stuff that gets filtered out in the mechanical filtration spot, if you have it in the same spot as water plants, it grows a soil substrate on the bottom, and then other plants will take over, and the planting palette that you planned is going to become imbalanced that way. And also, if you don't filter it out, it is gross on the bottom of your pool. So the goal, in my opinion, those are kind of like the strategies for how we should be approaching the natural pool. You know, over here, really distinct separation between the goals of each type of filtration. And then over here on the right is high circulation, having the water, you know, maybe there's some kind of like a waterfall-y feature of some kind. Algae also really loves a low oxygen environment. And whenever you add, like if water is falling off of a waterfall, it's getting really mixed up with the air and it's oxygenating the water. So like by adding in a waterfall, maybe even between the spaces, it's like a really simple and beautiful way of preventing algae bloom. And also all of the good plants for the bioretention area, they want oxygen. So you're helping those and hurting the bad ones. And also it looks much more similar to the surrounding landscape, right? I mean, this one on the right is a bit cheesy, I think, but like the essence of it and mimicking this actual thing that is just like Andre went on his hike there, I think that's a good idea.
So here, where are the areas where it doesn't seem like there's a clear separation between the filtering, the areas and that's possible? Because it seems like the plants are here, right? Or I
actually suspect that there's an alternative filtration area in this one, and that it's really more of a pool that has a water feature. That's a suspicion of mine. This was one of the only things that I could find that like wasn't terrible. Like you know those weird plastic waterfalls that you would see at like Disneyland, that's fake rocks and they look terrible. This was the closest image that I could get to that. Okay. But it was like the closest I could get to a visual example.
So but you will still like if we decided to go this route, which I think is very cool, you will still need this sort of divisions between the swimming pool and
Absolutely. So this is how it looks like in a diagram. So the typical design strategy is doing 50-50 regeneration and swimming with an optional filter between. What I think we should do to really ensure that a lot of the classic problems with natural pools, they don't happen ever, is that we should have, instead of doing 50-50, we do 40-40-20, a mechanical filtration area that can also be pollinator and firefly habitat. We do 40% biological filtration, which is planted areas, and then we do 40% swimming area. So how this actually looks like in a design is to be discussed. But I think that, and also I think having a really high turnover on the water that's recirculating is like pretty critical. Yeah. So, and then also the better that this water system is, the more likely it can be used in the house as gray water, or it can be used in the orchard as irrigation.
Wow.
And I mean, if you're talking about like electricity, pumps they're not low electricity, but they're reasonable. So it's much better to do this than to rely on like ulterior motives for getting water. And it's more sustainable.
Sounds very comprehensive water system.
So then I also took Andre's sketch and just sort of started, like I just kind of blocked it out the way that he had already done it. So I think the idea is that this is just beautiful landscape, and that the darker ones are the regeneration zone, and that the inner ones are the swimming area. And we can kind of like start to add some specificity to the actual site. And so what we'll do is inside of the mechanical filtration zone, we can also make it pollinator habitat. Inside of the regenerative biological filter, we can make it more of like a separate beautiful garden space. We can also, in areas that are not participating in the pool at all, we can put some really beautiful like native rhododendron glades in it. And then also an agricultural zone somewhere. So just generally kind of what it could potentially look like is, so maybe the water comes from the swimming area, goes over here. This is the mechanical filtration. It's like a beautiful rock garden that filters the big stuff. That water cascades over to here. This is like a pond, because then you also get this really lovely like entry.
Give me 1 second.
Yes. I don't know if we can pause the recording. Somebody just came in. I think Joseph's going to deal with it for just a second. Sorry for the delay. Andre, you can fast forward, of course.
Or don't look for you after, please. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so then we, like, this could be the regeneration pond, and then maybe there's little waterfalls that kind of separate these two places. We could also like make it a little smaller, so maybe the water goes straight here. That's the mechanical filtration zone, which is a lovely rock garden. This is the regeneration zone, which is a beautiful water garden, and then the swimming is here. I mean, we can add in like beautiful edging, just to like make it lovely. Then, you know, maybe there's like a rhododendron glade here. You have this really sweet, you know, there's like a walkway coming through, and then there's rhododendrons on either side, and it'll really feel like a beautiful tunnel of flowers. Maybe we start to darken up these pavings and kind of take inspiration from those really dark rocks that were in that river landscape. And then also maybe we start to connect it over to the agricultural zone and see if there's a realistic way to recirculate water from the pool system into the orchard or whatever kind of food producing landscape is larger. So just the summary. We talked about site conditions and strategies for natural pools. Haven't gotten into design yet, but I think that's of course going to be the next step. The site conditions, there's 3 actors: human, agriculture, ecosystem. We want to have a lovely pool space and create habitat for pollinators. We want the agriculture to be a protective food landscape that prevents erosion. And we want the ecosystem to support pollinators, which also supports the agriculture. And really leans into, like, these strategies are really, they're not fighting what is, I would say, is a difficult site. I think this is a difficult site in a lot of ways. It's not fighting the difficulties. It's leaning into what are those opportunities that it provides. Like, it's already on a slope. Instead of making a flat pool, we make it a little cascaded water thing. And we get this beautiful water feature. So, and instead of trying to put tomatoes on an erosion and super acidic prone soil type, that's a terrible idea. We protect the most steep areas with food producing native fruit plants or something. And then stabilize the soil, you get some food out of it, and you add in some pollination area. Then the second thing we talked about, natural pool strategy. Classic way of doing it is 1-to-1. I think that we need to alter that. Number one, algae is the most That is like the consistent problem with natural pools. By separating it into a 20, 40, 40 strategy and having it be a high circulation pool, we can make the water really clean. Most of it is done through design, and then like really have like a lovely pool. And it creates a lot of, it also creates a lot of like habitat opportunities. And I think it is a way more efficient filtration system than the classic like 50-50 balance. I already reiterated these guys. The problems are we have a pool. We want to do something cool with it. The rhododendrons have a lot of potential for like beauty. The open fields, we should keep some of those for pollinators. The soils are really difficult because of high acidity and low stability. And then the next steps, beginning like loose designs for what the pool is going to actually look like. I'll probably do some sketching. I'll probably do a little bit of site diagrams or something. And then also just do more research into the strategy. What more specifically do we do about erosion? We know it's a problem, but how do we realistically deal with it? This is a problem that's been happening for 100 years in the Tennessee Valley. Lots of people have tried interesting things, so a little more research is probably good. Also, what are realistic types of food plants to grow on the site? It's a really high acidity soil. That's a big deal actually. So I can look into like native tree producing trees that are food producing. And then also just like about some cool little pollinators. I think this is a really good firefly habitat. So that could be like, if we kind of lean into that and really curate a firefly forward experience, we could attract a really dramatic natural phenomenon there, which would be sweet. So that's my presentation. I can stop recording, or I'll let you stop recording. I think that was like 30 minutes. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, that's perfect. I mean, the way